Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to talk to you guys a little bit about DUP, or Daily Undulating Periodization, because I've had some people ask me, what do I think about it, that more people seem to be endorsing it in the YouTube community. And so let me clarify what DUP even is, because we know that concurrent style training has become more popular, and there's good reasons why concurrent training has become more popular. It's been done heavily by the Westside Barbell guys. Even my friend Alex Viata over at Complete Human Performance has his hybrid athletes do concurrent style training. And for those unfamiliar with that, the only people who might not understand this stuff are the ones coming purely from the bodybuilding world, not necessarily the strength training world. Because the bodybuilding world doesn't usually periodize its training the same way athletes do. But most athletes run some form of periodization. And for those unfamiliar with that, periodization means you separate your training days, weeks, and blocks and everything else into different rep ranges and workloads and everything. In other words, you're not coming in doing 5 sets of 10 on this exercise every single week. You rotate through things, and traditional periodization is usually set up into 3-week blocks to where you focus on an entire rep range or system for about 3 weeks and you rotate through a different one. If you guys aren't familiar with that, go look at my training playlist and look at my off-season linear periodization program. It'll give you an idea of what I'm talking about. It's a 12-week program divided into 4 3-week blocks, and you train a different rep range, and you basically go heavier as you go. In other words, each 3-week block you add volume through the 3 weeks. So you start at the lowest volume, and it starts with high reps and works you down to low reps over the 12 weeks. But you do 3 weeks of the same rep range, and you add volume over the 3 weeks, and you cut volume down, add weight, reduce reps, and repeat the process. So you basically wave load it in little 3-week sections for 12 weeks. Well, concurrent style training involves training different rep ranges or volumes or workloads inside of the same week. Westside guys traditionally, with their concurrent training, which they call the conjugate method, they have a max effort day, which is a really heavy day where you build to a max single, and they do those 2 different days a week. They basically have a squat and deadlift day, and then they have a pressing day. And then they have more of a volume day, and traditionally they do what they call dynamic effort or speed work, in which they do large numbers of sets at around 3 reps. So basically 9 or 10 sets of 3, using much lighter weights for maximum speed, and occasionally they'll swap that day out for what they would consider to be a hypertrophy day, doing 8 to 10 rep sets. And so these are done every week. In other words, 2 days each week dedicated for going really heavy, and then 2 days for speed with much lighter weight and more volume. All right, that's a concurrent style of training. And concurrent training has become popular because it seems to work very well for a lot of strength athletes. It works very well for in-season athletes who need to maintain different types of performance throughout the week, right? It helps you maintain different performance elements, because ultimately when you're doing periodization, you're focusing on a different element. It might be volume and fatigue, so strength, stamina. Might be just general strength with medium volumes. It could be maximum power and speed, or it could be maximum strength where you're doing maxes. So there's different components. Well, athletes oftentimes need to maintain different performance elements during their season. And the whole traditional idea was that, well, block periodization seems to allow for more overall progress in the long term, whereas in the concurrent training is better for maintaining those elements for being in season and peaking and things like that, is what's often argued. But the reality seems to be that concurrent style training, at least some of the preliminary data, things like Greg Nuckols has been looking at, seems to give a slight advantage to strength. And it's because it can oftentimes allow for a little more total recoverable training volume through the week because of the different performance elements being addressed on different days, and you having slightly different recovery patterns when you train in a different rep range. So there's a few different theories as to why it seems to give a very small advantage over traditional periodization. And people need to remember that seems to be a very small advantage. Now, daily undulating periodization usually involves using as many as 3 different rep ranges throughout the week. And the idea behind this is that you can train all the different rep ranges and you, again, wave load them. So even if you're training, whether it's a 3-day-a-week training or 4 or 5 or whatever you happen to be doing, let's make it really simple. Let's say you train Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And it doesn't matter whether it's a push, pull, legs, or a full body or some sort of upper, lower, whatever you want to break it up into. The whole idea is that maybe on Monday you do your really heavy work, your 1 to 3 reps. Wednesday you might do your 8 to 12 traditional hypertrophy range, and then Friday you'll do really high reps, something like 15 to 20 reps. And their whole idea is that you load through these so that you get the benefits of all the different rep ranges throughout the week. Well, this is a nice theory, but in practice, I don't think it actually has any benefits over traditional concurrent training. Meaning, I've never seen data that suggests that daily undulating periodization is superior in any way to standard concurrent training where you just train 2 different rep ranges or volumes in the same week. Because people need to remember, people are doing this thinking of it from a bodybuilding perspective in different rep ranges and not realizing that no rep range actually produces more hypertrophy. That's what the studies have found, and they're trying to essentially maximize the advantages of concurrent style training. But the point is, for overall performance, if your goal is to get as strong as possible, I don't think this is going to work because 3 different rep ranges isn't really going to help you. The only purpose of doing higher reps at all in a strength training program is to get a little more hypertrophy, which can make you stronger and allow, again, a little bit of nervous system recovery because you're not having to lift really heavy weights. Having extra different rep ranges in there isn't going to help with that. And when you look at the scientific literature, it would kind of indicate that there seems to be no real advantage to doing this. In other words, daily undulating periodization doesn't seem to have any advantage over any other form of concurrent training. It comes down to personal preference. In my opinion on it, because it doesn't have any advantage, it has no advantage at all over just using 2 different systems in the same week. Because I do a concurrent system. Right now, I have 2 days each week dedicated to really heavy triples, basically max effort triples and then volume triples. So mine's concurrent training, even though I train the exact same reps, not even rep range, I train the exact same reps. Some of my accessories I do 5s, but not even all of those. So in my case, there's no rep range variation, and I just have volume days and heavy days. When you compare that sort of approach with daily undulating periodization, it doesn't seem to have any advantages for strength or any advantages for hypertrophy. And I think in the long term, it could potentially have some mild strength disadvantages, but I can't prove that. But that being said, if you have 2 different systems of training that seem to produce equal results, but one of them requires more complexity with no payoff, I'm just not a fan. So because of that, I don't really support daily undulating periodization. And I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying it's wrong for someone to do it. But if anyone thinks that DUP has any sort of magical advantage for any outcome or goal over any other form of just standard concurrent training where you're training 2 different rep ranges or performance types in the same week, there's no evidence to show that it does. And people can say, well, I tried it and it worked better. Well, how did you measure that? That's why we don't do stuff like that. That's why when you're working with pro athletes and serious athletes, we don't do the, well, I tried this, because you didn't isolate the variables. You didn't do DEXA scans. You didn't perform tests objectively with someone else observing you and taking the measurements to prove that you got an advantage. And since in the research, there doesn't seem to be any measurable difference between the two, it's fair to say that the advantage was probably in your head. And again, if you're more comfortable with a system and you feel like you enjoy that system more and it works just as well as other stuff, there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that if that's what you choose to do. But if I'm asked my opinion of what do I think about it, I'm like, it's just another form of concurrent training that has an extra degree of complexity that I don't really see the benefits to. And I think for me, because of what I'm seeing more and more of in the literature, I'm not a fan of high reps at all. I'm reading the same studies. Other people are saying, hey, this seems to show high reps are really, really good. But I'm looking at the exact same data and conclusions, and I'm not drawing that same conclusion. In other words, I don't think high reps at this point are particularly good in general. Then again, that's just based upon me looking at the exact same data and looking at it from a different perspective, because those conclusions say what people want them to say instead of looking at the hard data and what the data shows. They're interpreting it a certain way, and I interpret it differently. So because of that, I just don't see the point of basically throwing extra days in of really, really high reps when you could just be doing 2 rep ranges and be getting all the benefits, the recovery and workload benefits of concurrent training. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.